The Jack Mallers Show is a top source for weekly Bitcoin news. In addition, I also recommend Natalie Brunell. She has a news segment on her podcast that comes out once a week in addition to her other episodes. But the Jack Mallers Show, Natalie Brunell's podcast of news, is only about 10 minutes per week. Jack Mallers is more like an hour and a half or even 2 hours of news per week, and he live streams it every Monday night, including takes live Q&A on YouTube. So he's actually answered quite a bit of stuff I've posted, and me and Lindy McGee were the ones that asked him to include Strike, his company, Strike, Strike, in the list of places you could buy Bitcoin on Bitkey, my favorite place to store Bitcoin for the long term. And initially he was skeptical and said his team had looked at it and decided not to, but they would look at it again. The next week he said they were actually looking at it. And the following week he announced that they would adopt it and integrate it into Bitkey, which they did. So that is now live. So thanks to Lindy McGee and for her help as we tag teamed getting that integrated with Strike and Bitkey. So I really like Jack Mallers. He does not have guests, which I like. He is a genius. I love his global perspective. That does not mean he's always right, but he just has a really good perspective on what's going on and why. So if somebody said, hey, I'm only going to do one thing each week to stay up on what's happening in the land of Bitcoin, I would say if it's only one thing, I would do the Jack Mallers Show if you have time on YouTube. If you don't have time to watch YouTube and you need something shorter, then Natalie Brunell's Coin Stories, I forget what she calls her news segments, whatever she calls her 10 minutes news segments, those are fantastically good as well and include all of the latest Bitcoin news. So I love those. And then obviously I subscribe to James Check and his Check on Chain newsletter, but that costs $29 per month and it's twice a week. So if you're super into Bitcoin and have a huge part of your net worth in Bitcoin, or you're like me with 100% of your assets in Bitcoin, then obviously, James Check, I absolutely recommend that. But his stuff is all analysis of the Bitcoin blockchain and the supply and demand flows related to it. So it's all based on human behavior. It's not based on news really at all. It's based on the human behavior of those that are buying and selling Bitcoin at any given time, and what that likely predicts for what will happen next in the world of Bitcoin. So it's different perspectives. Natalie Brunell's is more of a specific Bitcoin news, in 10 minutes. Jack Mallers is more, hey, here's an hour and a half to 2 hours of everything that's happening primarily in the United States, but also in the global economy that affects Bitcoin. So it's more of a, if Natalie Brunell's, news block, I think it's called news block, if her news block is sort of a 10,000 foot view of Bitcoin, Jack Mallers is more of a if Natalie Brunell's news block is a 10,000 foot sort of altitude look at Bitcoin, Jack Mallers is more like a 30,000 foot view of Bitcoin. And James Check is more of like an on the ground, literally 100 feet off the ground view of Bitcoin, actual transaction by transaction, in the weeds. So anyway, I find all of them helpful. The big picture perspective of Jack Mallers is super helpful because I have not found a better place to get it. Also, again, Natalie Brunell's news block is fantastic, although usually I see the same news on Twitter, but most people don't have time to troll Twitter all the time like I do to catch up on the latest Bitcoin news. So her news blocks are a great summary of all the news from the previous week. And then you've got the, James Check with his Check on Chain newsletter if you're really into analytics and technical analysis and charts and graphs and what they mean and what they predict about human behavior. So, but anyway, if somebody just said, hey, I'm only going to do one thing, I would say, the midpoint between the on the ground, I guess I'd be on the fence. If somebody just said, I just need, the quick hits of news, I would say the news block from Natalie Brunell is probably the way to get it. If you're willing to sit and watch more than an hour of YouTube related to Bitcoin and you want a bigger picture perspective, Jack Mallers is absolutely the way to get it. And again, if you want on the ground view of everything that's happening on the Bitcoin blockchain, James Check is your best source. So hopefully that helps. And I'm here. If you have any specific questions, always feel free to ask me anything, anytime.